Well, I'll tell you, David, if the world wasn't going as crazy in all respects as it is right now, there's a rather big topic we could have hit this week. But the size and potential impact of this topic that barely only made it to pre-show in light of all of the other crazy stuff going around the world tells you how nutty life is right now.
It sounds a little too farcical. It sounds like you're talking a big game too. It's like, you're not going to believe it. Like, when we tell you what it is so big. Like, all the other chicks thought it was massive.
Word on the street is. This topic is huge.
You can see it from space.
So anyway, the topic that we're not going to talk about this week, that we are talking about right now, is the finding that a certain portion of, and we're going to get to the specific portion, a certain portion of the genetic code for COVID matches a 2016, the date, 2016 patent of Moderna. Now, some scientists have estimated that the chances of this match, if COVID were a naturally occurring thing and not something engineered in a lab, the chances of this match to Moderna's patent is about a 1 in 3 trillion chance. Now, I'm no math magician.
So almost the same number of the chances of you dying from COVID. Pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, 7 billion people is a little bit less than even 1 trillion, let alone 3 trillion. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say you got pretty good chances.
So you're telling me there's a chance.
So now you might say, okay, well, who cares? Maybe this portion of COVID that matches this certain sequence from Moderna's patent, maybe it's just on this like frilly portion of the virus that doesn't really make any difference. Well, as it turns out, this what's called furin site, which is spelled Furin, it's the cleavage site.
Not a furry site, not like where you furries go.
It's a cleavage site on the COVID virus. And get this, quote, the part that makes it so good at infecting people and separates it from other coronaviruses. So they didn't just pick a random part of the Moderna patent to stick in here. They picked the specific site that makes this virus more transmissible to humans than occur from natural coronaviruses.
Like we said, completely incidental.
A bunch of coincidence.
No, it happened naturally through bats in Wuhan.
Yeah.
I just saw, before we went live, they were saying again that studies show that it's pretty much nailed on that bats in the Wuhan open market is where this started. It's like, wait, so you think that we're going to go back to where we started and not remember the 2 years that you just put us through? It's getting insulting at this point that they can't even make up new lies. They just thought, we haven't used this one. We're gonna go back to it.
So this article is from February 23rd of this year, which isn't even a full 4 days ago. As soon as this article comes out, the cathedral goes into overdrive. Hey, that whole lab leak thing, let's not focus on that for just a second.
Let's just go around
Let's
here.
Go back to bats.
Let's go back to the bats. Let's see if we can go back. We'll take bats for 500, Alec.
So, and listen, we're going to put the link to this Daily Mail article in the show notes so you can read it for yourself. And more importantly, read to the analysis cited therein about why some scientists think this is the case. But to the Daily Mail's credit, they also did include opposing expert opinion that says, well, this is probably just a quirky coincidence that this matches and stuff like that. We're not telling you which group of experts to believe because we're not CNN. You can go with the group or the individuals that say, this is a quirky accident or it's a coincidence that this matches Moderna's 2016 patent.
Completely.
Or you can go with the experts that say this is a 1 in 3 trillion
phenomenon.
Chance.
Completely random, happens every week phenomenon.
What's important is that you have the information. That's making up the cause for the debate.
We report,
and then
you decide.
That's right. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, guys, that's a pretty big bombshell of a story. What could possibly push that to the,
I
to
don't
the pre-show?
know. What could possibly have happened this week?
Impending thermonuclear annihilation.
In orders of magnitude, I think that's a little more
Yeah, let's hope that doesn't happen. But happen or not, we're going to talk about it on the other side of this jump in. Welcome to Weapons of Meme Destruction Podcast, episode 83, which can be found at wmdpodcast.com/83. Any podcast app, YouTube, Odyssey, just search Weapons of Meme Destruction on any of those platforms and episode 83, and you'll be able to find this one.
So do you have like really good sunglasses, like polarized? Are they polarized?
I do not.
Well, you need to get some.
I need to get the wrap around fully, like
everyone knows.
Coned in.
When we go thermo, you're going to want to get, unless you're polarized, you might as well just be wearing regular old glasses. Like you're not even protecting your eyes.
Yeah. It's
from the nuclear holocaust.
It's not a good deal. And so, first of all, David and I want to clarify a few things before we jump into this topic. If you haven't guessed it yet, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I think the people that listen to this podcast are going to be good at this, but most people that listen to mainstream talking points, they get it stuck in their head that, well, if you don't just regurgitate whatever comes out of the State Department, well, then you're either a Russian apologist or you support Russia, or you're some sort of Trumpian simp of Putin and all that kind of stuff that they always say is because that is a refusal to engage in the actual debate. And so we are putting it out front. What are our motivations, David? What do we care about the most in this situation? You've heard us say it on the podcast before about
human lives,
foreign policy being our probably our number one issue.
Human lives and suffering, and trying to limit that as much as possible.
Yeah.
In this world.
Yeah.
Not going to war over stupid, frivolous things, being drummed up by the media, being biting hook, line, and sinker into everything, and everything is there's no such thing as a just war. It's always just war.
Right.
Pretty much.
Exactly. And so, where we come down on this whole thing is every single government holds its culpability in this situation, whether it be the Russian government, the U.S. government, the government in Kiev, and the governments that make up the member nations of NATO and, openly hostile nations towards Russia, is that governments, old men, as the old saying goes, war is just young men paying the price for the decisions of old men. And that's exactly what's going on here is the men that are doing their geopolitical dick measuring. And again, I say men, I know Angela Merkel is, Anyway, that's neither here nor there. You get what I'm saying, is that people in positions of power that hold virtually no consequences for their own actions and decisions, push that burden off onto the rest of us, not the least of which the innocent Ukrainian civilians who are being caught in the crossfire of this whole thing. And so where do we side? With the people on both sides of the border, regardless of what arbitrary lines are drawn. It's the people that are always bearing the brunt of the decisions of their political masters. And that's what we take issue with.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I could say it any better myself. So
with that being said, a common theme that you'll hear from the pro-US, anti-Russian side of the argument is if you listen closely, their arguments are based on this idea that history started yesterday. Like when Biden gets up there and says, well, Putin's attack is completely unprovoked and yada, 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 and all the blame is there and none of it is over here. They act like history started yesterday. Like there's not decades of U.S. intervention and basically trying to stack the deck anti-Russian going all the way back to World War II. That history is rather important. And the people in both Ukraine and Russia haven't forgotten that history. Just because Americans don't know it, Biden gets away with saying stuff like that. But the history is important. And that's why we want to start this episode doing a really quick and dirty march across history, starting back in World War II, to kind of bring you up to speed as to what factors might be playing into Putin's decision-making, Ukraine's decision-making, etc. Have I filibustered long enough? Did you have something?
No, I have nothing to say.
I mean, because, all right. I mean, this history is going to be a little bit.
It's going to be a Dane-heavy episode, ladies and gentlemen. we got to get through some stuff. So just legalese, writing in, go.
So let's start our story back during World War II. Ukraine is obviously on the direct path between, the Germans invading Russia during Operation Barbarossa and the Russians coming back through on their march to Berlin at the end of World War II. And all throughout that, Ukraine is caught in the crossfire. And understandably so, out of some self-preservation and some other reasons. There were certain individuals, certain groups of people in Ukraine that openly collaborated with the Nazis. And were victim or were guilty of some war crimes. So a name that is going to pop up a lot is a guy named Stepan Bandera. And he was the leader of the Organization for Ukrainian Nationalism. So these are deeply, I don't know if patriotic is the word, but they are deeply their main modus operandi is protecting ethnic Ukrainians. Mm-hmm. Their nation is what they take pride in, all that kind of stuff. It's not that much different than a lot of other ideologies that put nation or race or your national heritage over the interests of others. And this is another important detail about OUN is their colors were red and black. And Bandera, for him as an individual, he had statements when he was collaborating, about purging Ukraine of all Jews and Russians.
Oy.
So,
not mincing any words there, huh?
Yeah. Now, to be fair, when he started to flex his group's muscle in terms of actually being an independent Ukraine, the Nazis did throw him in jail in 1941. But throughout the course of World War II, organizations linked with him were responsible, some estimates were responsible between 150 and 200,000 deaths, including extermination of groups of people based on ethnicity and stuff like that. War crimes by any other definition. And the United States stepped in even at that point and protected Bandera and many of his collaborators from suffering Nuremberg trial style consequences from this. The United States, because of the Ukrainian nationalist, kind of sentiment in the United States view, that serves as a Cold War necessity, as a bulwark against Russia. Because if nothing else, these groups are going to vehemently oppose Russia coming into their country. So that was the U.S. kind of, I guess, the State Department's rationalization, right, for aligning with somebody like Bandera and the people that, by any other definition, committed war crimes.
And I'm sure we had a very good tagline to go along with that. A very good reason why we couldn't do that.
Right. So this United States kind of nationalistic wing of, Ukrainian politics have been in business together essentially since 1946. So let's fast forward all the way to 2004, the first of Ukrainians' color revolutions, which was the Orange Revolution. And you had an argument after an election where Viktor Yanukovych, and that name is going to come up again, he won against a guy named Yushchenko, who was more on the anti-Russian, more pro-nationalist side. And then the results of the 2004 color revolution is that Yanukovych, or they re-elected, Yanukovych lost the second time, and Yushchenko took over. Well, a rather important thing about what Yushchenko did is he elevated, with the power of his office, much like a Congressional Medal of Honor would be in the United States, elevated Stepan Bandera to a national hero. Now, when a guy says we're going to purge Ukraine of all Jews and Russians, if you are ethnic Russian...
Didn't they steal some of his lines for Captain America during one of his speeches? I think they did, right? Like if Captain America goes, we need to get rid of all these damn Jewish people.
Yeah.
It would, I think that, wait, what? Like there wouldn't be people in the theater going, wait, what? He Captain America doesn't like Jewish people? That's weird.
Yeah.
That's off-putting. I thought he was a nice guy all the way up until then.
Well, and what I would say about, and now to be fair, I did talk to somebody this week who's from Ukraine, and he's like, well, listen, the whole debate about Bandera in Ukraine is kind of more nuanced than he was just a war criminal who had some pretty, appalling views, especially by today's standards. And why some, would want to openly affiliate with that. And he was like, well, when the Russians when the USSR Ukraine was a part of it, the Russians basically desecrated all of the memorials and sites for any other national heroes they could have had. And Bandera was like the only one they had left. So I don't know. Maybe that's a rationalization on their part. I don't know as much, but I mean, that would be a guy I would.
He's all we had. Okay. Get off our back.
So I just wanted to give the more global view of Bandera, just to say that that's the way people on the ground feel about it. But the facts are the facts. He is who he is. He said what he said. His group was responsible for what they were responsible for. Those are the facts. But because those are the facts, let's not pretend in our ignorance here in the West that those things don't matter to the people living in Ukraine. If you're an ethnic, linguistic, cultural Russian living on the Ukrainian side of the border in the two breakaway regions of Luhansk and Donetsk, if you are a Russian and you think, well, this government just made a national hero out of a guy that said purge Ukraine of all Russians, I might feel uncomfortable about that. And that might not be an unreasonable thing to feel uncomfortable
You don't
about.
think they're going to sit next to each other at Thanksgiving?
I don't think so.
Wait, they don't even celebrate Thanksgiving. That's so weird. Why doesn't every country celebrate our Thanksgiving thing?
I know, they should.
These fucking
Don't
idiots.
they know that this is America?
What, you don't like turkey? You don't like football?
The world's America's. Everybody else is just living.
Yeah, exactly. Like, wait. Let me get this straight. No turkey?
So now again, before we move on from 2004 to up to 2013, 2014, is remember Yushchenko, who originally lost to Yanukovych, and then after the Orange Revolution.
Can I pause you right there? It sounds like you're talking about tennis right now. It really does. I'm so sorry that I just
David,
completely
apologize to all of the Ukrainian citizens.
I apologize profusely, but all I'm like, well, what set is it? Are they going to take home the? I don't even know. I don't even know tennis. I can't even expound any further. But go ahead.
So,
The two tennis
threw
players.
me off.
The two
Yes.
tennis players.
So, Yanukovych
There we go.
in the re-election loses the second time, and Yushchenko comes to power. Doesn't really do much other than making Bandera a national hero.
And he's got a wicked backhand.
And he gets voted out in 2010 by Yanukovych again. And this time, the Yanukovych election was not debated. Yushchenko really screwed it up so bad that Yanukovych won by a healthier margin than the previous election. So in 2010, not a debate. Now he comes to power, and it's important to point out that Yanukovych is probably, I don't know if this is a fair label to say that he was pro-Russian the day he entered office, because again, didn't really have any issues for the first 3 years. But one of his promises was to get closer to the West. Well, how did that work out? So right around 2013, 2014, the IMF, the International Monetary
Just
Fund.
pick up the whole country and move back westward.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. Get that corner. I'll get this corner. Here we go.
We're going to go west. So the IMF, which basically is it's the International Monetary Fund, but you can just basically put that as that's synonymous with Western interest. The UK, United States, yada, yada, yada. And they have been known to financially cripple and keep in essential debt slavery to developing and third world countries around the world with their monetary policy. So the IMF is not this abstract, group of bankers that are just so wise and are fair and nice to everybody. The IMF has been known to be used as a political tool, especially by countries in the West like the United States. So the IMF makes Yanukovych a deal to snuggle up closer to Europe in 2013. And according to Yanukovych, the deal is not really in Ukraine's best interest. It's going to raise utility prices for Ukrainians without a raise in wages, which is going to impoverish Ukraine more. And it's just not in his country's best interest. So he turns to Russia and says, what about you? Can we set up a trade deal with you since they made me an offer I couldn't take? Let's trade, some Ukrainian wheat for some Russian oil, very simplified. And Russia said, fine. And that was a better deal, according to Yanukovych, for Ukraine. Backing out of that deal made some people in Ukraine very upset. And that's when the Euromaidan revolution, or it didn't eventually became a revolution, but the protests started in late 2013. Some interesting facts about this protest, though, is that it was funded and or organized by NGOs, which stands for non-governmental organizations, which basically after the CIA getting discredited throughout the Cold War for all of their screw-ups, NGOs kind of stepped in to fill that void, where they're not technically government arms, but they can go into places and give
they're like
funding.
A government 1099.
Yeah,
they're not actually like employed on the payroll, but they are subcontracted. Let's call it.
Yes, yeah, and then it gives the government plausible deniability.
We didn't know what they were doing. We had no idea. Doesn't that sound? It's just it sickens me. It's just the same lines over. We had no idea. That's just a complete organization that we had that is all by themselves.
Well, so
we are totally benefiting from all their work all the way up until now. Now it's become a problem.
All of their work seems to be very pro-American.
It's weird.
Or American government.
It must be kind of like that 1 in 3 trillion thing.
Yeah, it's the total coincidence.
It was a bat in Wuhan. It wasn't us.
So one of these NGOs is rather kind of sticking out like a sore thumb, the National Endowment for Democracy, because that NGO in particular has been involved in color revolutions all over the world for a long time. Every time you hear about the United States teaming up and arming moderate rebels in the Middle East to topple governments,
that's never bitten us in the ass before.
That's a lot of that is done with National Endowment for Democracy money. And people on the ground training people to, do this in a protest and don't do that and have the cameras here and not there. Another NGO funded or started by George Soros, actually, oddly enough, within a sequence of 3 days at the beginning of the Euromaidan protests in 2013, 3 independent TV channels just happened to pop up in Ukraine and become wildly popular. And all the coverage is very pro the group, the protest, right?
Okay.
Now, again, drawing back to U.S. parallels, you know how the lefties lose their minds over an organization like OWN, One America Network, because it's like pro-Trump, coverage, all that kind of stuff.
Fake news.
Yeah. Well, United States NGOs and United States money established 3 TV channels to positively cover the protests right around the beginning. Now, again, is that another one of those 1 in 3 trillion coincidences? Perhaps. But I know that if other governments around the world had NGOs and infiltrated our protests and pushed us in one direction or the other, I think the American people would have some feelings about that. No?
Yeah, no. I don't want to speak for the American people, but I would assume that they wouldn't be very happy about that.
Right. I would assume. I would assume that most countries would feel like that, and yet we do it almost with impunity.
And then what? We didn't do anything wrong.
Yes. Again,
we were just trying to help.
Referring back to that history didn't start yesterday.
Right.
And none other than in the middle of the protests, our old buddy on this podcast, John McCain, goes over to Ukraine and tells the protesters that, he is with them, America's with them, the world is with them. Now, again,
until you need something, then we won't be so with you. But all the way up until you need us to actually do something, we're right behind you.
Again, we're not saying these things to immediately in your mind discredit the validity of the protests that start. Again, Yanukovych didn't give the people that were upset what they wanted, which was closer ties with the West, and actually went closer with Russia. So they got upset. They started protesting. Completely reasonable thing to protest about. We're not suggesting ulterior motives from the beginning, but it's interesting to note that the protests started out very peaceful. There was no aggression from either side. But in one night on November 30th, everything changed.
They were mostly peaceful.
They were mostly peaceful.
Mostly peaceful
in the
protests.
Beginning. Right. There was some pushing and shoving or whatever, but up until November 30th of 2013.
So they were peaceful, and then they became mostly peaceful.
Right.
Gotcha.
And they became
mostly peaceful.
Not hardly peaceful.
Mostly peaceful.
So
that's the tagline, dude.
There's a couple key players in here and who they tie in with that will at least ask you questions about the coincidentality. That's a word.
I think it's just
of the things that went on at the Euromaidan protests. So a guy by the name of Popov was kind of like the police chief of that area of Ukraine. Okay, so he's the one with the most immediate command over the eventual riot soldiers, SWAT team, fully geared up riot soldiers that beat 70 some odd people the night that this really escalated. And then you have, I'm going to totally butcher this guy's name, Leovichkin, something like that.
Leovichkin?
Yeah. He was the chief of staff. Now, according to Yanukovych and some of the other leaders in government, they don't know who gave the order for the SWAT team to go beat up the people. But it had to come from Popov, and Popov didn't have the authority to do it. But he was talking to Leovichkin, whatever, earlier that day.
Leo. We'll just call him Leo.
Who, as the chief of staff, would have the authority to say, go and break up the crowd. Now, it's rather important to note who the guy whose name I can't pronounce.
Leo.
He was buddy-buddy with the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Pyatt, as well as Victoria Nuland, who was an official in the Obama administration and is coincidentally enough also now in the Biden administration. The pretext was to clear the Maidan for the installation of the annual Christmas tree. That was the order that was given to the cops. Break up the crowd because we want to bring in a Christmas tree. Now, pretext or no pretext, Leovichkin was actually photographed that night talking with the leader of the opposition. And now, who are some of these opposition leaders at Euromaidan?
Oh, no.
They were affiliated with some groups,
and
some of them political parties, Svoboda, Trident, Right Sector, and Fatherland. Now, those are some loosely affiliated actors within the country of Ukraine, but without casting aspersions, they are known as ultra-nationalistic, very concerned about ethnic Ukrainians, like want to limit immigration, all that kind of stuff. And again, not judging a policy one way or another, they have cozied up to the likes of Bandera, like Svoboda was that a political party. That was the one who Yushchenko ran under when he made Bandera a hero. So these groups agitating in the crowd who have been known to use paramilitary tactics to rile up people and get violent themselves, not unlike an Antifa type situation, right? Provocateurs in the crowd. These are some rather suspect individuals to be cozying up to. Now, why was the chief of staff of the Ukrainian government meeting with the opposition leader on that very night that the police end up getting turned loose on the people? I don't know. Maybe that's a coincidence, but that's a fact that happened. So, think about what you want. But the outcome of the Euromaidan protests, and I think it ultimately wound up in the death of 70-some civilians. So it was an ugly event. Is Yanukovych stepped down, but he wasn't impeached because according to the Constitution of Ukraine, you need 3/4 of, I don't know, whatever it's called, the essential legislative body to impeach. And he was never officially, and according to the rules of Ukraine, never officially removed. Now, all of that is to bring us up to date and say, Ukraine is a deeply, deeply divided country. About 50% linguistic and ethnic and everything Russian, like very pro-Russian, and that's in the east of the country. And in the west of the country is the types of group of people we've been talking about. Much more nationalistic, much more concerned with ethnic Ukrainians, much more willing to associate themselves with a guy like Stepan Bandera because, he had some things to say about Ukrainian nationalism, his war crimes notwithstanding. And I posit to you that if one group looks at a guy who says we're going to cleanse Ukraine of Russians, he also said Jews, but to the Russians that are living in the east of the country.
You always got to sprinkle in the Jews.
That might make some people that live in eastern Ukraine a little nervous. Call us crazy, but maybe that's why they make some political decisions that Kiev doesn't really want to hear about.
Again, it's a sticky situation. You can't even compare it here in America for us to understand that. It'd be like if 50% of us wanted to be Canadian and wanted to get rid of the normal USA people. Like, I don't know, man. It was a bold strategy to just go in and take it, but at the same time, it's been like, this isn't the first time either. I think didn't he a couple of years ago, he like kind of put troops on the line too, and
so that was the Crimean thing in 2015.
Right,
and that actually brings up a good point, because like we're talking about the people on the ground, that's who we're focused on.
Right.
And the people that we're talking about right now are Eastern Ukrainians, which tend to be a lot more Russian, and at least Russian sympathetic, right? They also live heavily in Crimea. When all of this happened, when the Yanukovych government was deposed, which again, in their eyes, who supported Yanukovych, it was an illegitimate coup. They don't look at the government in Kiev as being legitimate because the constitutional procedures weren't followed. Whether it was or it wasn't, I'm just saying that's why the people on the ground feel like that. And that's why in the 2015 referendum, with like something like 90% voter turnout, they voted 97-3 Crimea to join Russia.
Jesus.
Now, can we say that Putin uses all of this as pretext to say like, well, I'm just going to go protect Russians and that's why I'm invading? Of course, it gives him a pretext. But even if we grant that that's simply a pretext for him, that still doesn't change the facts on the ground of the people in Ukraine who are more concerned about their own government in Kiev and how they view them as ethnic Russians versus how their neighbors across the border feel.
Correct.
So the geopolitical part aside, if you just focus on the people itself, the who's right and who's wrong in this situation becomes a lot murkier than you will ever hear. Like if you want State Department talking points, that's not why you're listening to this podcast. Go watch CNN or MSNBC. All of this background information about why there are deep, tense divisions in that country, and understandable on both sides, is that can't be ignored for when people on the ground. So when Crimea voted to join Russia, what did the United States say? Oh, well, Russian troops were there and they kind of forced a vote or whatever. To the tune of 97% as like American soldiers in Iraq after the liberation in 2003 when they voted, like there wasn't any pressure from US soldiers. What I'm saying is what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Well, it's a lot of, they did it, so they shouldn't have done that. But then we've been doing that for years, like we pointed out at the beginning of this, and we never seem to hold our own feet to the fire. But it's like we want to play a game, but we're allowed to do whatever the hell we want. But if somebody else does something, we call foul.
Right. It's a war crime.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't know. Not to just shit on America, because I love this country too. But and I guess this is kind of
love the country, not the government.
Yeah. Exactly. It's just that. I guess this is just the way foreign policy is. I guess the holier than thou approach, like it was, I had to do it when I did it, but you're just doing it to be evil, is the approach that we take with a lot of our diplomacy with other countries, it seems like.
Yeah. I mean, here's the other thing. So we were also talking about some parallels. So for example, the Maidan Revolution and the Color Revolution of 2004, are those not January 6th? And I'm talking to the people who lost their minds about January 6th was a terrible coup or whatever the case may be, is it's always, when it happens somewhere else in the world, it's always an exclusively pro-democratic popular uprising. And there's never this sort of like underneath agitation that goes on that's
maybe
loosely tied to the U.S. State Department and all that kind of stuff. But yet when we look domestically at January 6th, it's like, that was a violent attack on democracy. I'll guarantee you there are a lot of ethnic Russians living in eastern Ukraine that look at both 2004 and 2013, 2014 as January 6th style insurrections, you know? But after that happens, you know, the two like easternmost provinces of Ukraine of Luhansk and Donetsk, you know, vote in referendum to either become, I can't remember which it is. They either wanted to become independent republics like by themselves, or they wanted to join the Russian Federation. And again, people say, oh, well, that's illegitimate. Russia was putting pressure and all that kind of stuff. Maybe, maybe not. Is it completely out of left field unreasonable to think that maybe those referendums were legit because the people in that area of the country were legitimately concerned that the people who associate with a guy that wants to cleanse all Russians out of Ukraine is the party in power?
I don't know about his policies. Let's give him a chance. I don't want to rush to judgments, even though he just said he wanted to cleanse me.
So, and you know, since those votes, again, casualties are estimated between 13 to 15,000. Obviously, Kiev says that this is Russian shelling that's been going on since 2015 in these regions, and they're all Russian fault for death. Russia says that the Kiev government has been shelling the citizens in these two, you know, breakaway regions the whole time, and they're the ones responsible for the death. Who knows? Propaganda abounds on all sides, but the fundamental thing that we always come back to is the rights to self-determination, i.e. secession. Is that if the people in Luhansk and Donetsk don't feel good about their political binds with Kiev, let them leave. But just like the government in Kiev doesn't want them to, the government in Russia does want them to, but also the government in Russia is worried about the government in Kiev's ties with the West. And the West has all of their interests, both geopolitically, economically, et cetera, to have it go a certain way. And so they're intervening. And all across the board, you see government. And what winds up happening? Private, peaceful, individual citizens are killed by governments fighting over shit that they're not even entitled to.
It's the same old song and dance. It's since the dawn of time. So I guess the main question, or the only question I have, is like, are the people, like you and I, this country, every other country, are all of us monkeys gonna let 5 monkeys decide that they're going to nuke this entire planet without anyone stepping up and saying, hey, we're over this shit. Yeah. We've been doing this for too long. It's the, again, we bring it up again, like governments are the only thing that never get graded out. Like you get graded out on your, you know, report card. You get graded out at your job. You get graded out as your family member. You know, you rank up, you have efficacy. Like it's the only one that is a consummate fuck up that never gets held accountable for anything that it does. In fact, it gets rewarded and more powerful each and every rendition of itself that it keeps growing and growing. And it only ever leads to bad results, and it wants you to implicitly trust it.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not just this, it's not privy just to us and the US government, it's privy to all around the world. Like England's, I just was listening to another podcast, they're pulling back all of their mandates, COVID mandates and everything, because basically they said they were wrong. And enough people stood up and said, we have the articles that say that everything that you did was wrong. And they're like, they kind of just threw their hands up and said, all right, everything's over. Like eventually, if enough people stand up and just say, we will not do this anymore, we won't comply, we aren't fighting you, we don't need to storm the Capitol and take your head, but we're not playing your game anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That would be enough of a protest.
Well, and a white pill kind of response to that is, I mean, that's what we're doing with things like Bitcoin. We're building parallel institutions to the extent that we don't need to shoot bullets anymore to revolt. Hopefully that is going to be a thing of the past soon. You know, because if you you take away the money base and the ability to infinitely inflate away their poor political choices, if you take that ability away from politicians, you've completely drained them. There's nothing they can do. And so, whether that happens all at once or gradually over time, there are parallel institutions being built which directly compete with what people traditionally think the state should be responsible for. And it's out competing it. And if enough people just simply opt out of the system, then hopefully we won't have madmen running around with their finger hovering over the launch button,
If you thought you were under pressure during COVID, thinking that you might get a virus, imagine the pressure you're going to feel when America and Russia, that it's been known for years, for decades, maybe even it's closing in on 100 years, that we've had enough nukes between the two of us to destroy 5 planets, let alone just this one.
Yeah.
So you want pressure. It's going to make COVID look like a walk in the park because that nuclear holocaust is no fun. And there's nowhere to go, brothers. We haven't terraformed Mars yet. We have
get on that, Elon.
Yeah, come on, Elon. I'm getting kind of sick of this crap down here. But anyway.
But yeah, like on that point about that David was making about the more government screws up, the bigger it gets. Because like, oh, well, really messed that one up. Now we need to be more powerful to take on this new thing.
Well, the reason that we didn't do it is because you didn't give us enough money. That's the problem.
Is going back to that concept of history didn't start yesterday, and that all of this is just blowback from previous American intervention, getting engaged in Ukraine's domestic politics to the extent that it agitates the already existing tensions in that country, to then aggravate it by incentivizing people to question the legitimacy of their elections and all that kind of. That's why this whole January 6th parallel is just so interesting to me, is because just Russian collusion. Well, the United States is actively participating in what some people might call a coup to take out one government because it's deemed not sufficiently pro-Western enough.
And we've decided
and install
that
it
for
with
them.
Another one, despite the fact that other one is a Ukrainian version of a quote unquote moderate rebel, shouting, nationalist and some say, neo-Nazi leanings with some of the groups that the United States supported to take over the government in Kiev. That might make some people in that country nervous. Understandably so.
I wonder why.
Now, I've heard this, like, you can't make this point anymore, that some of these groups, despite their open symbolism of using, red and black, which was, like I said, the colors of that OUN from, World War II that actually committed the real war crimes, they were using the same imagery, the red and black, all that kind of stuff. So they're not exactly hiding their sentiments in that regard. But some people will reply with that, well, then why is the current president Jewish? Like Zelensky is Jewish. How would that group, if they were in control of the government, allow him to be president? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how much influence those groups have within the current government today. What I do know is those groups were heavily involved in agitating the general Euromaidan protest, which was, again, peaceful at the beginning, and agitating and making it more violent than it otherwise would have been. Now, who's responsible for calling the shot? Who's responsible for escalating the use of force in that situation? I don't know. But I know that the United States' fingerprints is all over it. I mean, could you imagine if we had if on January 6th, somebody from Russia, came over and spoke to the protesters and says Russia's with
they've been saying for 4 years before that.
Yeah,
that Russia was in the White House. That's how he got in. Russia. Just
imagine if that happened. How much the establishment in the U.S.
if the tables were turned. Right, exactly. How pissed off Americans would actually be. And then another thing too. Maybe this is our shoddy attempt to bring the country back together. I guess, because what's the one thing that, was it Reagan or was it like Eisenhower that said in his speech that
Reagan at the UN?
Yeah, where like the only thing
threat, like
right,
an alien or something.
All of our bickering and all of our countries and borders and all that stuff would go away. Basically, what he was saying was like, if something came down out of the sky and was a threat to humanity, all of a sudden all of our quibbling and worrying about borders would go away because we'd have this new thing to deal with and we'd all work in synergy.
Right.
Maybe that's what they're trying to do with this Russian ploy. Silver linings, and there is no silver linings when you have mass casualties of a population. And again, our hearts go out to everybody that's on the ground there, and we just want the safety for the people. But it just seems like I don't know. At least they're trying to bring us back together, if that's what they're doing.
Well,
but I don't know.
What I'll say about that is would this bring the Ukrainians together? I'm talking about America.
Us using this story, Russia is a bad guy again. No shit.
Oh yeah,
to bring this country back together after they've just been dividing us for the last 8 years.
On that Russia bad guy thing, we've talked about this on a few episodes now, and it fits perfectly here, the concept of Manicheanism. When you make everything that's not your in-group the epitome of evil, and everybody in your in-group that is, a saint that can't do anything wrong, then not only do you place all the blame on the other side and have no room for discussion, but you forgive the mistakes or problems or transgressions of your own side because they're ultimate light. And that whole mentality is just all throughout the American media's portrayal of this.
Wasn't
whole
Oppenheimer?
Thing.
He was a Nazi scientist, and then we grabbed him and made the.
I don't know if Oppenheimer was. I know
his entire team was.
Many Nazi team members we brought over under Operation Paperclip. Yes.
They were. Not criminals.
Criminals. Not unlike going out of our way to protect. I'm again
drawing these lines about how when we do it, it's fine, but when they do it, it's fucking evil. Remember when Trump, every liberal shit their pants when he said, "Well, America's not that nice of a place. We haven't been that nice to people either." It's and every American went,
yeah. Gets so upset.
Yeah, it's fucking true. You gotta crack. Granted, you gotta crack a couple eggs to make an omelet, but all I'm saying is don't be holier than thou afterwards.
Well, and so here's the really bad thing about that Manicheist worldview is not only do you not take into account any role that your side played in causing this, but you just assume only negative motives on the other side. Now, again, could Putin be using concern for ethnic, linguistic, cultural Russians living in the east of Ukraine? Could he legitimately be concerned and be interested in protecting them from aggression from their own government?
Sure.
It's possible. Is it possible that there are people living in eastern Ukraine that asked explicitly for his help because they were afraid of their government in Kiev? Of course. But again, if you have this Manicheist worldview, then you just throw all that out the window and you say, well, it's only because he wants to expand Russia forever and always. And he has said some problematic things in this regard, not actually considering Ukraine a country. He's it's basically like Russia South. So, he has his own motives. But here's the thing is when you don't listen to what the other side has to say, the blowback could be potentially larger. And we always use the example of Osama bin Laden. If you listen to Al-Qaeda pre-2001, they told you exactly why they were upset. Because the United States, by being in the Middle East, American boots were on the ground on land they considered sacred. Sacred. Now, that's why they said they were upset, but nobody wanted to listen. And then when the towers came down, it was all, they hate us because we're free. Osama bin Laden was worried over in his cave that we allow women to vote and wear blue jeans. That's what he was concerned about. Not the fact that we had been on...
It sounds pretty stupid when you say it out loud, doesn't it?
It does
It
sound
sounds
very
really
stupid.
fucking stupid. We better go bomb some mountains then because they don't like us because, like you said, Levi's.
So maybe, perhaps, if somebody in the American regime had said, listen, we don't need to agree with this guy, just like we don't have to say that Putin's incursion is justified in any way, shape, or form by all of this history that we laid out. We don't have to say that justifies his actions today, but it says a lot about if we had talked more before it got to this point, when he says, listen, I'm really worried about Ukraine on my border, being in NATO. And I'm really, you guys got mad about the Russian the Cuban Missile Crisis during the Cold War. Well, Havana is about 1,100 miles from Washington, D.C. Crimea is 700 miles from Moscow. So again, if the United States was worried about the Cuban Missile Crisis, why would it be unreasonable for Putin to be worried about, NATO expanding all the way into Ukraine? Again, it leaves room for nuance if you just don't say Putin evil and then never consider anything else ever. Well, this is what the American regime thrives on in terms of endless war.
Which is why they want you to think in checkers. They don't want you to think chess. They certainly don't want you to think 3D chess. They want you to think in checkers. This, good. Food, good in face.
Mm-hmm.
Me, no like him because he Russian. Like that doesn't... There is nuance here. Granted, we've been... I guess this would be kind of like Cold War-esque, but I mean, ever since the wall went down, or the disillusionment or dissolving of the USSR,
mm-hmm.
we've still always kind of been. Yeah, you feel that? They feel that tension in the room. Like we'd walk in and be like, I'm like, I wish you would have let me know that he was Newman. Yeah, exactly. I was like, I wish you would have let me know that he was going to be at this party. I would have come up with something else to do. But okay, we're here now. So I guess I'll go get some drink. But anyway, before we take this any further, just when you pursue everything with nuance and understanding that there's probably a deeper layer to it. I just feel bad for, everyone caught in them. It feels like they're like the little kid in the room and mommy and daddy are arguing and tugging on its arms which way it wants to go. And unfortunately, it caught the brunt of a lot of bad policy, a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding of totally different political ideologies. So again, we hope for a quick resolution to this and for as many people to find safety during this time as possible.
And just because, or just one final thing to address, just because this is a supporting listener in that private Facebook group. So if you would like to join that group and suggest topics and ask questions like this, $5 a month, support our work over at WNewPodcast.com. $5 a month gets you access to that private Facebook group. So his question was, okay, all is well and good, guys, but what would a libertarian president do right now? And I'm going to say the first libertarian cop-out that is going to leave you very unsatisfied, so we'll explain more, is, first of all, if we had libertarians as president, this would have never happened. All of the blowback of American foreign policy, again, not listening to anybody in the region, not taking into account the nuances, within Ukrainian society, but also the concerns of Russia proper, we would have never been here. And now you say, that's unsatisfying because we are here. We want to know how you'd fix it now. The quick one is...
What do you do when you find yourself in a hole? What's the first thing you do?
You keep digging. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I can see the other side. I know it's right there.
Yeah, so keep digging is definitely what we would not do. I am a big proponent of the kind of what America posited itself as a long time ago is the shining city on a hill. Lead the world by example, not by threat of force. So immediately open up political asylum for anybody fleeing Ukraine. You can come to the United States. We are the land of the free. You're safe here.
But drop that cleansing bullshit at the door, okay? We're not about that.
Yeah. Temporary political asylum until everything dies down, in addition to support within reason. I think the way that I would probably go about support is not direct, giving them, because that's stolen money from taxpayers. But I would go to private companies and I would be like, hey, do you do medical services? Do you do anything to contribute to Ukraine at all? Yes. Okay. If you go help them right now, I'm going to put a 5-year moratorium on your corporate taxes. You don't have to pay tax for 5 years. Kind of incentivize private actors to go help and to donate and help the people of Ukraine without using stolen taxpayer dollars. But other than that, I mean, in my view, there is no force answer to this.
Right.
A military option is not on the table.
You can't undo 200 years of this kind of policy in one presidency. That's asking for the world. But
yeah, you cannot escalate it. You can try to sit down as quickly as possible. Like they asked Biden, how would you sit down with Putin or whatever? And he said no. And then when Jen Psaki was asked about it later, they're like, why isn't he doing this? She goes, because he invaded Ukraine. The negotiations need to be going on at all times.
Right.
They should have been going on 24/7, 365 leading up to it. And they should be going on now. What can we do to get this to stop?
Right.
And again, I know that's going to be unsatisfactory.
You want to look weak.
People are going to be like, yeah,
I hate to look weak.
Yada, yada, yada. I'll guarantee you, if they were afraid of our military might, this would not have happened. So it's not about a libertarian president looking weak. It's that they weren't concerned about American military presence because there's a lot of other things going on, like them cozying up with China, et cetera, et cetera. If they legitimately thought there was going to be U.S. military intervention, it would have never happened. So it's not about us looking weak by saying, how can we stop this? It's about the weakness is already there. And who knows, maybe because they see a deeply divided United States coming out the other side of COVID, like now is the time to do it. Maybe that was their analysis. I don't know. But I also wasn't responsible for the domestic policies that put one half of this country at the throats of the other half. That wouldn't have happened under a libertarian president either.
So we're just crazy, crazy people over here voting third party like a bunch of degenerates.
A bunch of big
throwing our vote away. Just throwing it away.
Yeah, anyway. Because the ones that keep winning are doing such a fine job.
Just need to make it bigger. That's what it was. We just need to be bigger next week. But speaking of next week, let's end this week. How could they find this podcast, Dane?
They can find this at wmdpodcast.com/83, any podcast app, YouTube, Odyssey, but also link up with us on our other socials, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're going to get a TikTok 2.0 up there pretty soon because our first one, I'm pretty sure, is perma-banned. So link up with us all there, but most importantly, on the email list on the website, because no matter what we get kicked off of, you'll always be able to find us there. And go to the Support Our Work tab on the website, because that's where you can throw some bones our way and try to keep this.
And one more shot across the bow before we go.
Independent news source coming at you.
I just think it's weird that I can see cop violence, people shooting each other on TikTok, women pretty much being naked and dancing around on TikTok, but they draw the line at political ideology. That's where it's off. That's where it's off.
Well, we got nuked for talking about COVID stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that's just an opinion. Like I've seen people die on TikTok, but that's fine. But Jesus Christ.
The funny thing is, what we got banned for, I didn't even give an opinion.
Right.
I literally just reported on a story.
And you put a graph from one of the news agencies.
I said, this thing happened. Here's the article if you want to read about this thing happening.
I could. This is that thing that happened in white.
And they're like, ban them now.
I can go negative and turn it into that blue kind of color. Other than that. So
well, for now, the podcast is safe.
Okay.
The other socials, we don't know. But for now, you can get us almost
on
everywhere.
all those places that Dane said.
Yeah.
So until next week, kiddos.
Stay safe. Stay sanitary.
Rub your hands together when you're sanitizing.
Good luck and all love
get in between the fingers too.
To the people in the crossfire.
Not just the palms. You want to get in between the fingies too. That's where a lot of the bacteria hangs out. That's where COVID hangs out.